The palace of Susa lay shrouded in incense and whispers. Curtains of embroidered silk muffled the moans of the dying king. Darius II, Lord of Asia, conqueror of countless nations, gasped for breath on his gilded bed. His body, once wrapped in strength, was now withered, trembling like a candle in the wind. Priests chanted sacred hymns, their voices echoing in the vaulted halls. Courtiers waited in silence, each already calculating the balance of power after the last breath left the great king. At the foot of the bed stood two princes. Artaxerxes, the eldest, solemn, slow in movement, his face carved into the stillness of duty. Cyrus, the younger, eyes burning, restless, his every gesture sharp with ambition. Beside them, Queen Parysatis, mother to both, leaned close to Cyrus. Her whisper was a dagger hidden in velvet. "The throne should be yours. The blood of kings runs hotter in you than in him." Cyrus stiffened. The words coiled inside his chest like fire. He did not look at his brother. He stared instead into the dying eyes of his father. When Darius II finally exhaled his last breath, the empire bowed to Artaxerxes II. Yet, in the shadows of the funeral torches, Cyrus clenched his fists and swore in silence. He would not kneel. Days later, in the temple of Anahita, flames roared from the sacred altar. The smell of burnt offerings filled the air. Cyrus stood alone before the fire, the light dancing on his armor, casting his face into alternating shadow and blaze. He raised his hand, his voice low but hard as bronze. "I was not born to serve. If the gods deny me the crown, I will seize it with the sword. If the world calls me traitor, so be it. For I will not be forgotten." The flames roared higher, as though answering his vow. In that instant, Cyrus was no longer simply a prince. He was a challenger to the throne, a man who would wager empires for a single chance at greatness. Cyrus knew he could not rely on the vast armies of Persia. They were many, but fragile. Scattered by fear, too easily swayed by the power of gold. To strike at Artaxerxes, Cyrus needed a weapon sharper than numbers. He needed the iron discipline of the Greeks. Messengers sailed across the Aegean Sea, their ships heavy with silver and promises. They sought out the veterans of the Peloponnesian War, men who had spent their lives in blood and bronze. In Sparta, they found Clearchus, a hardened exile. Scarred and unyielding, he listened to the offer. The envoy poured a bag of gold onto the table. The coins gleamed in the firelight. Clearchus leaned forward, his voice like steel. "How many men do you want?" "As many as gold can summon." Clearchus smirked. War was the only language he understood. In Boeotia, the envoy approached Proxenus, more philosopher than soldier, who dreamed of glory and honor. He hesitated, then accepted, believing this campaign might carve his name into memory. In Thessaly, the ambitious Menon did not ask questions. He accepted the gold with a smile, already calculating what rewards might follow. One by one, thousands answered the call. Soldiers from Athens, Sparta, and the islands. Men without home, without purpose, but not without weapons. In time, more than 10,000 Greeks assembled. They were mercenaries, not patriots. But in their discipline, in their unwavering phalanx, Cyrus saw the sword that could carve his path to the throne. The army set out from Asia Minor. The roads shook with the tramp of thousands of feet, the sun flashing off helmets and spear tips. Shields clanged as men adjusted their grips. Bronze glimmered like waves rolling across a desert sea. Peasants along the roads watched from behind stone walls. Women clutched children, priests muttered prayers, and old men stared in silence. For them, the Greeks were not men, but apparitions of war. Faces hidden behind polished helmets, voices chanting in strange rhythms. Night after night, the mercenaries gathered around their campfires. Sparks drifted into the dark as voices whispered, "They say we march against rebels in the mountains." No one pays this much gold for mountain tribes. Their suspicion grew. But the coins in their purses dulled the sharp edge of doubt. Cyrus, however, kept the truth locked behind his burning eyes. They were not marching against rebels. They were marching against the King of Kings himself. The further they marched, the heavier the air became. Through Phrygia, through Cilicia, through valleys and mountains, the columns pressed on. At night, the camp was restless. Fires crackled, casting eerie shadows on bronze helmets. Some soldiers sharpened their spears in silence, others muttered prayers to gods far from home. Veterans whispered darker truths. This is no small war. We march into the lion's mouth. Among them wandered Xenophon, not yet the leader he would become, but a philosopher in search of experience. He studied their faces by firelight. The fear, the greed, the hunger for glory. In his heart, a question grew. If we die here, who will remember us? The wind howled through the desert, carrying dust and the taste of foreboding. The march had become more than a campaign. It had become destiny. The army pushed forward, day after day, through the heart of the empire. The sun scorched their bronze helmets, and the dust clung to their cloaks. They crossed rivers where horses floundered in the current, and they marched past ruined villages where children peered from behind crumbling walls. Yet the further they went, the clearer the truth became. This was no campaign against mountain tribes. The distance, the provisions, the very scale of their march. It all spoke of something far greater. Whispers spread through the ranks like wildfire. Men looked at each other with uneasy eyes. Still, none dared turn back. The gold weighed heavy in their purses, and Cyrus's will drove them onward. At the Euphrates, the Greeks drank like men who had found salvation. The water shimmered in the desert sun. Yet beyond the far bank, columns of smoke darkened the horizon. Dust clouds rose in terrifying swells. Scouts galloped back, faces pale with fear. The king is coming. The king himself marches with his host. The Greeks tightened their grips on their spears. Their eyes turned toward Cyrus, who only smiled with grim satisfaction. The truth was out. There was no turning back. That night, the campfires burned low. Silence hung heavy, broken only by the crackle of wood and the distant cry of jackals. In a circle lit by flickering torches, a Persian priest cast the entrails of a bull into the flames. The soldiers watched in anxious stillness as smoke curled upward, black against the stars. The priest's voice trembled. Victory will belong to the bold, but beware. The blood of kings will be spilled. The words fell like stones into the silence. Faces tightened. Men shifted uneasily on their shields. Each asked the same question: whose blood? At the edge of the firelight, Xenophon stood watching. He saw the fear in their eyes, the hunger for answers. In that moment, he understood they were not marching into a battle. They were marching into a tragedy written by the gods themselves. The dawn revealed the nightmare in full. Across the plain, the horizon seemed alive. The royal Persian army stretched as far as the eye could see. Infantry in endless ranks, cavalry glittering in gold and silver, chariots bristling with scythe blades mounted on their wheels. The sound of drums rolled like thunder across the desert floor. The Greeks, fewer than 15,000 with their allies, stood on the right flank, their phalanx tight, shields locked, spears bristling. Their line was a wall of bronze against a sea of men. A veteran whispered hoarsely, "They are countless, like the stars in the sky." Cyrus rode among them, his eyes burning with the fire of ambition. "There is the king," he said, pointing to the chariot in the center of the vast host. "If I strike him down, the empire will be mine." His soldiers looked upon him in awe, some in doubt, others in admiration. They did not yet know that this would be his last sunrise. In the shade of a heavy tent, the Greek generals gathered. Oil lamps cast long shadows across their faces. The air was thick with sweat and tension. Clearchus spoke first, voice firm as iron. "We hold the right flank, near the river. There, the land is firm, and our phalanx will not break. Whatever they throw against us, we will not yield." Proxenus, the philosopher, cautioned restraint. "We fight for gold, not for a homeland. Do not throw our lives away on reckless charges." Manon, cunning and ambitious, smiled. "This is glory. If we fight well, kings will pay us forever." The debate swirled until Cyrus himself cut through with fiery words. "I care nothing for their numbers. I want only one man, Artaxerxes. Strike him down, and the empire is ours." The generals fell silent. His plan was audacious, reckless, perhaps impossible. Yet Cyrus's will left no room for doubt. As the sun set, the camp sank into uneasy quiet. Fires burned low, men whispered prayers, and the desert wind carried the scent of dust and fate. Some soldiers sat sharpening their spears, faces grim. Others stared into the flames, lost in thought. The veterans muttered of Thermopylae, of Marathon, of battles where Greeks had stood against impossible odds. Xenophon, moving among the men, saw their fear and their resolve. He felt the weight of history pressing down upon them. This was no longer about gold, or kings, or contracts. This was about survival, and about glory. In the distance, the Persian camp glowed like a city of fire. Tens of thousands waited to descend upon them. And in the silence of that night, the fate of Cyrus, the Greeks, and the empire itself was sealed. The desert trembled beneath the first light of day. The sun rose blood-red, casting the plain of Cunaxa into an ominous glow. Heat shimmered above the sand as the armies assembled. On one side, the Greeks, less than 15,000 strong, standing shoulder to shoulder, their shields interlocked, their spears angled forward like a forest of iron. Their bronze helmets glinted, their expressions hidden, their discipline unshaken. On the other, the Persian host, stretching across the horizon in a vast, glittering sea. Chariots fitted with scythe blades gleamed menacingly. Cavalry in ornate armor stamped impatiently, banners of 100 satrapies flapping in the desert wind. The roar of drums and war cries thundered across the plain. In the center, in a chariot draped with royal banners, stood Artaxerxes II, the great king. Cyrus rode before his men, his eyes blazing with fury and hope. He raised his sword high and cried out, "Today I die a slave, or live as a king, or live." The cry carried across the Greek ranks. 1,000 shields rattled in reply. The Persians advanced, their arrows blotting the sun. A black storm of shafts rained upon the Greeks. Shields thudded under the impact. Men grunted but held the line. Then came the chariots. Thundering forward, wheels fitted with blades meant to carve through men like grass. The earth shook with their charge. But the Greeks did not break. At the last instant, they opened their ranks, letting the chariots thunder through empty gaps. Horses and drivers crashed into spears, cut down in chaos. The phalanx closed again, unbroken, unyielding. Then, with one voice, the Greeks roared their ancient cry. Alala! The phalanx surged forward. Shields slammed against shields, spears thrust into flesh. The first Persian line shattered under the disciplined wall of bronze. Blood sprayed, dust rose, screams filled the air. The Greek right wing drove forward like an unstoppable tide. Wherever the Greeks struck, the Persians crumbled. Cavalry wheeled and fled, archers scattered, infantry broke in panic. A veteran shouted above the din, "They cannot stand against us. Their flank is broken." Indeed, the Greek right wing carved a path through the Persian left. The invincible host of the king was collapsing, piece by piece. Messengers raced to Cyrus. "The Greeks are victorious on the flank!" Cyrus's face lit with fierce joy. His mercenaries had proven invincible. The tide of battle was turning. And yet, the heart of the enemy still beat unbroken at the center, where Artaxerxes commanded from his royal chariot. Cyrus saw his brother. For a heartbeat, nothing else existed. The dust, the chaos, the armies. It all fell away. He saw only the man who had stolen the throne. He spurred his horse, sword gleaming, and roared, "There! There is the usurper! Follow me! Strike him down!" With a small band of loyal cavalry, Cyrus hurled himself into the heart of the Persian center. They crashed into the king's guard with ferocious impact. Spears splintered, swords clashed, men screamed. Cyrus fought like a man possessed, cutting through bodyguards, driving toward his brother. For an instant, he was within reach. He could see Artaxerxes' face. Fear, disbelief, and fury. Victory was a single strike away. But fate had other plans. In the chaos, a spear found him. It pierced his eye, driving deep into his skull. Cyrus fell from his horse, blood pouring across the sand. His sword slipped from his hand, his body crumpling beneath the hooves of the melee. A cry tore across the field. "Cyrus is dead! Cyrus has fallen!" His cavalry, struck with terror, scattered. The dream of empire bled into the dust. The Greeks, still victorious on the flank, did not yet know their cause was lost. They advanced steadily, smashing all before them, unaware that the man who had bound them together lay lifeless on the ground of Cunaxa. The sun blazed overhead. The dust choked the air. The body of Cyrus, once the fire of ambition, lay trampled in silence. The battlefield lay strewn with corpses. Dust drifted in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. The Greek phalanx, still unbroken, stood in grim silence. They had carved victory from impossible odds. But their triumph was hollow. A messenger arrived, dragged before the generals. His voice quavered, but the words fell like thunder. Cyrus is dead. The prince is slain. The camp froze. Shields slipped from hands. Some cursed, others wept. Men who had fought with iron discipline now stared in disbelief. The man who had bound them together, the reason for their march, lay lifeless in the desert dust. Xenophon later wrote, "We had not been defeated, yet we had lost everything." From the royal camp came overtures of peace. Tissaphernes, the cunning satrap, approached under banners of truce. He promised safety, provisions, a path home. His words dripped with honey, but his eyes glittered with malice. The generals debated. Could they trust him? Clearchus, stern and pragmatic, urged cooperation. Without allies, we cannot escape. Better to talk than starve in the desert. And so, under escort, the Greek leaders entered the Persian tents. The atmosphere was heavy with perfumed smoke, wine flowing from silver cups. Tissaphernes smiled as he spoke of friendship. But behind the curtains, daggers waited. It happened swiftly, like a thunderclap. Persian guards surged forward. Blades flashed. Clearchus, betrayed, fought like a lion but was struck down. Proxenus was seized, his face pale with shock. Menon begged for mercy, his cowardice unmasked. One by one, the commanders were taken, bound, executed. Their bodies were cast aside like broken shields. Back in the Greek camp, the news spread like wildfire. Soldiers screamed in rage and despair. They had not only lost their prince, they had now lost their generals. Discipline teetered on collapse. Men beat their shields, tore at their hair, cursed the gods. In the darkness, it seemed the 10,000 would dissolve into chaos, swallowed by the empire around them. That night, despair hung heavy. The campfires flickered low, shadows stretching like claws. But in the midst of silence, a new voice rose. It was Xenophon, a young Athenian, more philosopher than soldier. Yet his words cut through fear like a spear through flesh. He cried out to the men, "Why do you wail? Were you defeated in battle? No. We stood like walls of bronze, and we crushed all before us. What we lack is not strength, but leaders. Then let us be our own leaders. Let us march not for a king, not for gold, but for our freedom." The soldiers, stunned, lifted their eyes. They had lost Cyrus. They had lost Clearchus. But in this young voice they heard hope. A murmur spread. Spears struck shields in agreement. The chaos of despair became the rhythm of resolve. By torchlight, the 10,000 gathered in assembly. Xenophon urged them to choose new commanders, men of their own number, chosen by merit, not gold. They elected leaders from each tribe, forging unity from the ashes of betrayal. Then, raising their spears as one, they swore, "We will not bow to the Persian king. We will march through deserts, rivers, and mountains. We will fight to the last, and we will see our homeland again." The sound of bronze striking bronze thundered across the night. An army once for hire had become an army of destiny. The retreat, the greatest in ancient history, had begun. The march began across the burning plains. The sun hammered down upon bronze helmets until they seared the skin. Dust clouds filled mouths and lungs. Horses collapsed. Wagons splintered. Men stumbled like shadows across the endless sand. Food ran short. Water skins dried. Some drank from muddy pools. Others chewed leather straps to fight hunger. Each night, funeral pyres burned. The flames carried the names of comrades to the dark sky. And yet, each morning, the phalanx formed again. Shields locked, spears lifted. The discipline of Greece endured even in hell. As Xenophon later wrote, "We were not defeated by the enemy, but by hunger, thirst, and the merciless land." From burning desert they climbed into frozen death. Snow fell thick, burying tracks, numbing flesh. Cloaks stiffened with frost, fingers cracked, lips turned blue. The cold killed silently. Men lay down to rest and never rose again. Wolves circled at night, their howls mingling with the cries of the dying. Soldiers pressed closer to their fires, eyes hollow, yet shields still at their sides. But the Greeks endured. They cut paths through snow, carried the weak, and fought off tribes who rained arrows from icy cliffs. Each step was paid with suffering, but each step carried them closer to survival. In narrow mountain passes, enemy tribes struck. Arrows hissed, stones tumbled from above, screams echoed off the cliffs. The Greeks closed ranks. The phalanx became a moving fortress, spears bristling, shields angled against missiles. Step by step, they advanced, pushing through ambushes, their discipline unbreakable. One soldier shouted, "We are not fighting for a king now. We fight for our lives, for Greece, for home." Their cry carried through the snow as the Persians and tribesmen broke before them. Even in despair, the 10,000 were unconquerable. At last, after months of torment, the scouts climbed a ridge. They vanished into the mist. And then a cry burst forth. "Thálatta! Thálatta! The sea! The sea!" The shout rolled down the mountainside. Soldiers threw down shields and ran forward. Men who had not wept through death and hunger now cried like children. They embraced one another, fell to their knees, lifted their arms to the heavens. From the ridge they saw it, the Black Sea, vast and glimmering, the gateway home. Tears, laughter, and prayers mingled. They built altars from stone, sacrificed to Zeus and Poseidon, and gave thanks. For though thousands had perished, the survivors had defied empires, deserts, and mountains. They had endured the impossible. Though many would never return to Greece, the tale of the 10,000 spread like wildfire. In Persia, the king's court trembled. For if 10,000 mercenaries could carve a path through the empire and escape, what might a true invasion accomplish? The illusion of Persian invincibility was shattered. Decades later, a young Macedonian prince named Alexander studied Xenophon's account, the Anabasis. From it, he learned the roads, the rivers, the weaknesses of Persia. And when he marched east, he did not march blindly. He marched with the memory of the 10,000 guiding him. As for Xenophon, he carried his pen as faithfully as his sword. His writings immortalized not only the battles, but the spirit of men who, abandoned in a hostile land, forged unity from despair. He gave voice to the eternal truth. Greatness lies not only in victory, but in endurance. And so, the cry of the 10,000 still echoes across history. Thálatta, Thálatta, not merely a cry for the sea, but for survival, for freedom, for the unbreakable spirit of mankind.